Okay, you might have noticed by now that not all cells look exactly the same. In fact, pretty much every different type of cell looks slightly different, and that's because each one of them has different jobs. So we're going to have a look at a whole variety of different types of cells and look at how their shape and their organelles and the number of organelles they have all differ because of the type of job that they have to perform. Now you're going to go into this in a lot more detail in later years, but we're just going to stick with some of the basics. Now you don't need to know the name here, that this is a palisade parenchyma cell, but what you do need to know is that this is obviously a plant cell because it's got a really thick cell wall. I'm going to focus in on that there. A really thick cell wall, and it's obviously got a really big vacuole in the middle and lots of little green dots around the side, which are chloroplasts. Now chloroplasts, of course, are how the plant makes food. So any of the cells of the plant that are near the outside where they can actually see the sunlight are going to have those chloroplasts in them. Now the other thing I'm going to focus in on are these guard cells down here. These are pretty cool. These are essentially the plant's mouth. Now they open and shut on the leaves and let CO2 gas in and water in and out and oxygen out. Okay, so their whole job is to open and close. So they actually have a little vacuole in here that loses water really quickly and allows the cell to actually collapse down and close whenever they're low on water. So that's essentially their job. So let's have a look at the organelles that these guys have. Number one, this guy's job is to make food, so he has lots of chloroplasts. He also is a plant cell and needs to hold his shape really well, so he has a large vacuole. All cells have a nucleus, well, most cells, but we won't get into that right now. And because he's a plant cell, he has a really thick cell wall to help him hold his shape as long as his vacuole is filled up. Same down here, the guard cell. Thick cell wall, especially on this side here. He has a very large vacuole, just the same as this guy. He does have some chloroplasts, but his job is not to make food. His job is to shut as soon as he loses water. So he might have some chloroplasts here, but not many. His main organelle that really helps with his function here is his vacuole, because as soon as it loses water, he collapses down and that hole shuts tight. So that's two plant cells. Let's look at a few other cells. Here are two more plant cells. These are stone cells and pollen grains. Now stone cells, basically they're that really hard tissue that you find around the outside of nuts and stuff, or when you bite into like a peach, the stone that you actually have in there, they're the cells that make up that stone. Their whole job is to protect. Okay, so in order to protect something, you've got to be pretty hard. So they actually have most of their body is devoted to being really, really hard. So all this area around the outside of these cells, I'm going to try and zoom in a bit there. All of that area there around the outside is its cell wall. It's extremely thick, okay? And that's so that it becomes really hard and can actually protect the rest of whatever it's encasing inside it. So it has a little bit of a cell in here with a vacuole and nucleus and cytoplasm and everything, but the majority of the cell is this huge cell wall because his whole job is devoted towards covering something as a skin and protecting it. Now this is a pollen grain. Now essentially this is plant sperm. Okay, his whole job is to deliver genetic material to a flower. So he's got to be able to move around and deliver that material. So let's have a look at his shape here. He starts out looking like this, okay, and he has a really thick cell wall as well to protect the genetic material inside. But when he actually lands on a flower, he actually grows this tubule out like this. We call it a pollen tube, and its entire job is to allow the sperm cells to actually go down that tube and be delivered to the ovary in the flower. So again, his structure is determined by his function. And here at last, two more plant cells. Now these guys here have two jobs as well. Epidermal cells and root hair cells. Epidermal cells have the same job that your epidermal cells are. They are basically the skin of the plant, and their job is to protect. Okay, so any tissues that have cells where they have to protect have these long flat cells that tend to overlap each other so that they form a whole web of overlapping cells for protection. And on top of that, the plant cells have a really thick layer of wax on the very external surface here to try and help protect them as well. Like every other plant cell, they have a cell wall to hold their shape. They have a very large vacuole that presses out against that cell wall to help hold its shape. And they have a nucleus, okay? And they will often have little green chloroplasts around there if they are in a place where they can get exposed to the sun. If this was an epidermal cell in the plant that goes under the ground, like on the outside of a potato, well, it doesn't see the sunlight, so it won't have chloroplasts there. But it will if it's part of the epidermal cells that you'll see on a leaf. So again, its shape and the organelles that it has is determined by its function. Now, last but not least for plants, here is a root hair cell here. Now, it's a little bit hard to get your head around this until I say this part here, the projection that goes out into the soil. Here's a picture of it, just a moment, of how it looks in reality. So this is the root hair cells coming out here, like that. And that little lump there is basically sitting just in here in the root, and there's projections are going out in here into the soil. His whole job is to collect water and nutrients from the soil. So the more area that he has touching the soil, the quicker he can get that water and nutrients into him. If you actually strip the hairs off the roots like this, if you strip them off when you take them out of the soil and then replant them, the plant will die because it actually needs those root hairs to help it absorb water fast enough. So if his whole job is to absorb water and store it and send it on, then he's going to need a organelle that helps him to store water. And that organelle, of course, is a vacuole. He's actually got 3 here that run along that root hair, okay? Of course, he has a nucleus, so he knows what to do. And because he's in the soil and stuff, he's going to need some protection. So he has a really thick cell wall that you can see, okay? But he doesn't have much else other than that. He doesn't have chloroplasts because he's not seeing the sunlight. So he doesn't need them because he can't photosynthesize anyway. However, he does need to store water. And so his primary organelle is a vacuole. So that really starts to show you how these guys have, their structure is very much related to their function. Now, you have a few plant organelles and plant cells on your handout that you actually have to talk about what their function is and what organelles or shapes that you can see that help them to do that job. Now you need to go and just complete the ones on the plant cells first, and there's another video on the animal cells.